back to Lex Reads. So, in today's video, I wanted to talk about, I was going to say favorite characters in books, but mainly memorable characters in books. I was thinking about, some books that I can't get out of my head in conjunction with the characters that I may not have just like loved the book, but the characters were so memorable to me. Yeah, I just want to share some with you. So yeah, let's just get started. First, I would say this character, I didn't necessarily like this book. It was okay book. It's a one and done, but reason why this character is memorable to me because of the things that she did. And that book is Queenie by Candace Carty Williams. I remember when this book came out, it was like a big phenomenon. The cover is just unbelievably pretty that you don't even want to read the book. You just want to get the cover. In the beginning, this was when I was just getting into reading, and anything black, I'm like, yes, I'm getting it. But then when I saw this cover with these braids, I said, I'm getting this. I didn't even care what it was about. And then I bought it and I looked at the synopsis and read it. And I said, well, maybe I'm going to try it. And it's not a book for everyone. It's a one and done. I would say if you haven't read this book, trigger warning, you have to be in the right mindset because this book talks about physical, verbal abuse, mental abuse. It's very sexual. Sexual assault, yeah. Because the things that she does is just like, girl. I mean, the fact that you have your gynecologist thinking that you may have been assaulted, but it's like, no, I wasn't. My partner was just very rough. You think that that's okay? Now there is a series for this. It's a limited series on Hulu. Y'all, I tried to watch this and I just couldn't get into it. I honestly couldn't. I tried to watch it twice. And you know how like you're watching something but you're also doing something at the same time? I did that and I did it twice and I could not get into it. I remember my sister, she was like, she's like, hey, I watched it. She watched it in one sitting and I'm like, well, girl, you hadn't read the book, okay? So it's different from like reading the book and watching the series, or vice versa. But yeah, I could not get into the series, and I'm like, maybe I might try it again. But the fact that I tried twice and it just was not doing anything to me, I'm like, maybe that's just my key to, yeah. Sometimes you're just not into it, and I was not into it. Okay, next this is actually a favorite book of mine, and I just love everything about this book. Surprisingly, it's not a black author, but it is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This was required reading for me my 10th grade? No, junior year of high school. This is the only book I liked my whole 4 years in high school. This book, people say, oh, a great American classic. I do agree with him with this. A lot of times they'd be like, yeah, I don't know what y'all talking about. That's not a great American classic. This, unbelievable. And the fact that it's so short, but it packs a punch that the characters are well-rounded, the story is well-rounded, it tells a well-rounded story. You know, it's I also like the movies and everything. Now Gatsby now is on Broadway, which I did not realize until a couple months ago. I don't know if I would necessarily want to see this on Broadway. I do like the films, I would say. Surprisingly, I like the newest one that came out with Leonardo DiCaprio. And it was crazy because they kind of modernized it. They still have the whole story. They didn't change any of the story. I think that's why I liked it. Because it did have some modern aspects because they had like Jay-Z playing in the background. I'm like, girl, this is in the 20s. But the way that they did it, they did it right. And it's so weird because it's like, it's Jay-Z and it's modern, but they kept with the story. I think that's why I liked it. They didn't change anything. They didn't add anything. There's no need to change and there's no need to add with this story because the story is perfect. You learn about the author and the fact that, he died thinking he didn't write anything that was great. He didn't really think anything of this book. This book did not sell well at all when it came out, and it became a phenomenon after he passed. It was like just a resurgence. And I mean, this book it's required reading for, some schools. For me, it was. And like I said, this is the only book that I liked. Jay Gatsby is a character that you just won't forget. You can't forget him. And his love for Daisy and his just wanting to be accepted and just the sacrifices that he made. And again, that love that he had for that girl. Oh my gosh. It just was no other. But this book, if you guys haven't read Gatsby, please read it. Okay. Next, oh Lord, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is the first book I read of this amount of pages. I had never read a book that was over 800 pages. The way they describe this book, they describe it as torture porn. Oh Lord, like how some people watch porn, you can't take your eyes off of it, and then it's torture because of the things that happen to the character, Jude St. Francis. This is a book about four young men, and really, there's no more of the story, no plot. You just see them growing up when they first meet in college, and all the way up until they're in their 50s, and then what Hanya does is to fill in, the blanks and the gaps. She talks about like their life growing up. And Jude St. Francis, I have never read a character that had so much trauma. Is an understatement. Every time I mention this book, I always say that trauma is an understatement, and you have to get your mind right to read this book. This is not for the weak at all. This book, I read it once, I don't need to read it again. And sometimes with books, when I do like, tab it, sometimes I'll go back and read the tabs. I can't go back and read the tabs. There's nothing happy about this book. And when you learn about what happens to him and why he is the way he is, this book deals with self-harm. It deals with sexual, verbal, mental abuse. It deals with pedophilia, eating disorder, disabilities, everything that is horrible and tormented. This book is in it. Again, it is not for the weak. I wanted to read this after watching so many vlogs and people talking about it, and people liked it. And it was like, this book, you have every emotion. And I remember watching some vlogs where people just were bawling their eyes out. And it's like, that book makes you do that? It makes you do it. But the scene that I cried is not the scene where everyone else cried. There was a hospital scene, and it got me. I think also too, the reason why this book is I'm so sensitive to this book is because Jude St. Francis reminds me so much of my uncle. My uncle was a sickly person, and it was like every time he came from the doctors, it was always another diagnosis. But he always would say, okay, what can we do? Go to the next step. He did that until the end of his life. And it reminded me, I remember when I was reading this, I said, this character reminds me of somebody. Jude reminds me of someone. And I said, he reminds me of my Uncle Jamar. Oh my gosh. So I think that's why it hits home to me. And then just the torture that, he goes through. Yeah, y'all. You would never forget Jude St. Francis. And when I read this book, no, it was before the pandemic. Yeah, because I don't think I could read this during the pandemic. No, girl, no. We was already going through so much, but oh yeah. Next is The Reader by Bernard Schlink. I've talked about this book before so many times because I don't even know how I end up stumbling up on this story. I watched the movie first and then I read the book. And yeah, I don't even know how I stumbled up on this movie. This book and the movie. First of all, I would say this is the first time where I watched a movie where it was exactly the same as the book. They just had one scene that they omitted, and it wasn't even a big scene. The backdrop of this book, it is dealing with a little bit of the Holocaust, but it's not just heavy on that. That's not the focus of the story at all, but it's a backdrop. You have a young man. He was coming home from school. He gets very sick. He ends up vomiting. You have a woman that helps him. He goes home and they find out he has scarlet fever or something like that. He tells his mom, there was a young lady that helped me. And the mom says, well, do you have an address, And he says, yeah. She said, well, maybe you should send her some flowers. That's what he does. But he ends up having a relationship with her. Meanwhile, this child is 15. This grown woman This grown woman is in her 30s, maybe about 36 or something. They have a relationship for the summer. No one knows about it. One day he comes to the house to do what they do. Everything's cleaned out. He don't know where she went. Years go by. He's in university now. He's studying to be a lawyer. Judge says, "Is this Hannah Splits speaking?" And he looks up and is like, "Oh my gosh." And that's all I'm going to say. This book was so unpredictable. It's very easy to read. This book is only 216 pages, and it is not as heavy as you would think. Because again, I did say the backdrop is the Holocaust, and then you have a relationship with a teenager and a grown woman. But the way that this author wrote this book, and then I was doing some research, and I watched the interview with Charlie Rose when he used to do his interviews, when he used to have his show, and they were asking him, oh, I'm sorry, you guys, about the sun. Did you know Hannah Schlitz? Like, is this based off of a real person? And the way he answered it, he's like, I kind of knew of a woman. And they're like, okay, are you Michael? That's the young boy. And he wouldn't directly answer it. And they were like, okay, so is this, where did you get this story from? And I knew of a person that, kind of remind me of Hannah. It's like, okay, well, did she do what she did? And he's just being around the bush. So you don't know. I'm like, this author, I like this author so much that I did get another book of his. Oh, I forgot what it's called. Because he writes stories where the women, there's a past, and you want to know, okay, why is this woman the way she is? He writes stories like that. I would say, if you don't want to read the book, at least watch the movie. Kate Winslet, she won an Academy Award for playing Hannah, and it was fantastic. It was so good, you guys. I cannot rave about this book so much. I just wish I can tell you what happened, because you like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. I remember when I watched that movie and I was linking it, I said, oh, that's why she made him do that. Please, y'all. Please, please, please. Again, if you do not read the book, watch the movie. Lastly, I'm going to mention this author. First of all, it's 2 of her books. This is my favorite author of all times. Read all her books. She's automatic buy. This author, I will buy, girl, if she come up with a coloring book, I'm buying it, okay? And that is Bernice L. McFadden. Now, the 2 books and the 2 characters that are memorable that you will never forget is, to me, first is Sugar. This is her first book. You're not going to forget Sugar Lacy. You can't forget Sugar Lacy. You can't at all. This character is just beyond memorable. Sugar Lacy is a sex worker. It's during the 1950s, and she befriends a older woman. And when you learn about her lifestyle and her connection and all that, it's, oh my gosh. I have 2 copies of this book. I've read this twice. Love it so much. Then her latest book that came out in 2018, it is called Praise Song for the Butterflies. I love this book so much. I actually have a vlog on this book and this book. No spoilers, of course. But this book is the reason why I got into African literature, because I wanted to see how a true African writes literature as opposed to an African American. This is based on a young girl named Obeyo. Can't forget Obeyo. It is talking about the Chukwazi system that is, I think it's primarily in Uganda, where it's modern day slavery. They call it a shrine is basically like a plantation, where the difference is you pick a person in your family. Like if you have committed a sin, you pick a person from your family that will pay for your sins. And it could be something like adultery, fornication, lying, stealing. And in this case, her family, they have problems with money, and the dad's like, well, let me just pick her, and that will, make our life, because we are giving her to basically the gods, that we will be blessed, and, we won't have to be, in a situation. And you die there. you're supposed to die there. And like I said, it's modern day slavery. So you have the girls working from sun up, sundown, prostitution. It's a horrible condition. It's just like American slavery. But with Obeo, she stays there for 15 years, I believe. Um, she's 9, and I think she's like 20 something when she leaves. And the courage and the perseverance that this girl has, you would think she would be mad at everyone and has the right to. And oh my gosh, this little girl. And then when she became older, I was like, oh, this girl is a saint, okay? I it's a story I never read before, and the fact that it is based on true events, like this still goes on, this practice of the jacuzzi system, and it's supposed to be banned, but it still goes on. And in the vlog that I did, I have clips of real life girls that were in this system that talks about it. You guys watch that video. Again, I don't give out spoilers. I always like to read passages so you can get a gist of the book or get a gist of how the writer writes. And then for me, I'm a visual person, so if I can find clips in real life, things and events, I like to put it in the vlog. And after I read this book and I realized that it was, real events and went on in real life, I wanted to research. And when I find those clips of those girls that were in that system and they were able to get out, but you have some girls that weren't, it just was mind-boggling, because I'm like, the fact that slavery still goes on, oh my gosh. Y'all, please pick this book up. This book, to be such a heavy hitter, this book is only 244 pages. And Bernice does that. She is an author that she can write heavy topics, but she writes it in little pages, but you still get everything. You get a well-rounded story. You get beyond closure. And then her books are not the same as her other stories. This is not the same as Sugar at all. It's not like how you have, a character that is just in a different setting. No, none of her books. And her books are memorable. All of her characters, like I said, you're not going to forget Sugar Lacy, and you're not going to forget Obey Akata. If you have not read Bernice McFadden, please pick her up. You would not regret it. So yeah, guys, that is it for this video of memorable characters I think about from time to time. I was trying to think if it was any more, but for some reason those books, they get to me. And again, they're not books that I necessarily just love. Like Queenie, that's a one and done. But you cannot forget the things that she does, okay? Yeah, guys, that's all I have for you, and I'll be back with more Black Books. Bye.